My name is Mike Race. I am the CEO and co-founder of Longshot Space Technologies Corporation.
And what is Longshot doing? What are we doing with this giant gun?
This big old tube behind me right here. Got a lot of plumbing in this place, man. Well, this delightfully overblown piece of sewer pipe you see behind you is a gun that can push about half a kilogram up to about Mach 4.5. On a good day, more reliably, Mach 4.2.
Okay.
It's basically a ripoff of a bunch of technology that got put on the shelf at the end of World War II.
Like railgun stuff, or
basically, but we don't use
those giant sort of.
So the Germans had a bunch of gigantic guns.
Yeah.
Okay, so the story goes.
Yeah.
World War I, Germans build a bunch of railway guns. You have to literally put two train tracks next to each other to move the things. They're comically bad weapons because they literally, the only way you can scale a gun is by making the temperature and pressure higher and higher and higher. And these things would literally vomit out like a ton of steel every time they were shot, but just gutting the barrel. So in the Paris guns, they could only fire 60 times and each shell had to be larger. World War II comes around and the Germans are like, we're not gonna make that mistake, we're gonna make new mistakes. So they built a multi-injection gun, which instead of going boom, went pop, 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 pop. So every time you double the number of injections for a given energy investment, the maximum pressure, the maximum temperature, and the maximum force of acceleration that's applied to the payload cuts in half. Okay. So you make it longer and you make it gentler and you can make it out of like sewer pipe, which is what they had left because they were getting the dog shit bombed out of them at the time, rightfully so. They wanted to build a bunch of these things underground in northern France to flatten London, which was like a thing of Hitler's at that time. He was very much into the idea. It turns out that a giant installation on the side of the hill is a pretty great target for planes dropping bombs out of them. So the British and Americans just flattened it over and over again, and then the war ended. So it was a bad weapon. And the story that I have about this is like, why do we put stuff into space with rockets? Because they're great weapons. The Germans showed in World War II, they did both these technologies side by side, and it was really clear that the V2 was like, it was actually also a mediocre weapon, but the Americans showed that the atomic bomb was a thing, and it was like, oh.
Let's pair them together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Whoever took this and put it on top of one of those, man, Bob's your uncle. So the supergun technology, because you can't hide them, you're never gonna put a supergun on a submarine. That's not gonna happen, right? And nobody cares, like the supergun's got like great marginal costs, but if you're literally ending all life on the planet, we care.
The idea of the supergun was sort of the same of the rocket in the sense that we're just going to launch a projectile super far.
Super fast. The core difference in these approaches, and this is true of companies like Spin Launch, Auriga, you might have heard of in LA, they're doing magnetic rail launch, is that a rocket has to carry all the energy and infrastructure and fly.
Right.
A kinetic launch system is just make it go super fast and let it go. So all the speed is being invested on the ground versus being invested in flight. Rockets operate on a bleeding edge of possibility. I think Elon has actually said this, that like if Earth's gravity were 3% higher,
the math doesn't check out.
It wouldn't work. So, you know, really, really great rockets deliver like 1% of their total mass to orbit. That's bad. And if they only blow up catastrophically 1 out of 500 times, that's an amazingly good rocket. And if you were to apply that standard to, say, your automobile, right? You know, it would be the size of a house and it would kill you monthly, right? So I think that we find ourselves in this place because after World War II, the Soviet Union and the United States collectively sank about $4 trillion into rockets.
To the space race,
Into the space race, and that was because it was a weapon. It was a really great weapon technology. And they were showing off like, hey, you better not mess with us. We can do this.
Right.
The core point that I'd make about superguns is like, from a technical perspective, they're actually incredibly uncontroversial. People have all these reasons why they can't work. And then you go back to the 1960s and you look at the work of like there's this guy named Gerald Bull, whose story is wild. And he was doing suborbital shots with basically juiced up battleship cannons in like 63, 64. It's not the technology, it's the lack of a good weapons application, which is ironic because it's a gun.
As far as you getting interested in this, you've got a slightly unconventional path on this compared to a lot of aerospace people I talk to.
I'm not an aerospace.
Yeah, so you were in the military.
Yeah, I
You
was
served-
a paratrooper.
and you
now I'm
served
like
in-
2 paratroopers, the masses.
You served in Afghanistan twice, right?
Twice.
And I know you end up working at Ames at one point.
Yeah, because of a YouTube video. By
At
the way.
NASA Ames.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about your this
The
path you've
twists
been
and
on.
turns.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in the Army. I hated it. I like eating and sleeping and not getting yelled at terribly. But I served, got back, got out, started studying economics. I actually just really love history and economics, sort of like where I go. In like 2009 or something, I'm out of the Army and I'm going to community college. And for a random biology project, I asked my professor if I could do an extra credit assignment on using engineered microorganisms to terraform Mars. And she said, bro, I'm not going to stop you. So I did, and I loved it. I really enjoyed that. I found the one textbook on terraforming written by some British orthodontist in the 80s, and like, it was super cool. I ended up turning that into a 10-minute YouTube video, because that's as long as YouTube videos could be at that
Okay.
time. John Cumbers, who now is like a man about town synthetic biology dude, was working on his PhD at NASA Ames, working on extremophilic cyanobacteria. He said, hey, dude on YouTube, how would you like to work for me for no money for a summer? To which I replied, of course.
Yeah.
Of course I would love to work for you for no money for a summer. I drove from North Carolina to California in 2 days. I slept on John's couch for a summer. I worked at Ames. And that's when I started meeting people. I finished my degree in economics, almost double majored in biology while working in an astrobiology lab, met my wife there. Got out of school for my bachelor's degree, worked at a couple startups, one biotech, one aerospace. I learned what a good startup and a bad startup, a really bad startup, kind of look like from the inside. Incredibly instructive. I would say working at a catastrophically bad startup is the best education you can get as like a potential future founder.
Sure.
And then after the startup fell over, burned down, slid into a swamp, I went back to college, finished a master's degree in molecular. And at this point, so I'm a bacterial geneticist by my master's degree and a kind of economist with a focus on history in my bachelor's.
Okay, and so you're doing all this stuff, and then one day,
I'm old. I'm getting old.
Well,
I'm
you
like,
start to think about this idea pops in your head just from things you'd read about. And,
I had a list of like 10 ideas I'd been marinating for like a decade. And like kinetic launch was one of those. I saw a talk by a dude named John Hunter, probably the biggest technical expert on space guns on the planet. Guy's like 80 years old. He actually came up here and gave like a 2-day seminar. I just paid him to come up and do it because I knew that like what's in this guy's head is like a treasure trove of very specific technical knowledge that's going to be hard to find any other way. So fast forward, I'm like 34, 35. COVID is just kicking off, and I'm like, you know what the perfect time to start a startup is? Middle of a gigantic and extremely ambiguous plague. Let's do that. Bad thinking. But anyways, I finished my master's, and I think that like having a startup seems to be a lot like having an infant. Comparable level of difficulty. It's not something you want to do for your first time in the 40s. You want to try and do it while you're still young and you have the energy for it. So I talked to my wife, and I got a 6-month leave of absence where I could basically be a complete piece of garbage and earn no money. And I used every day of that to basically raise a friends and family round for Longshot. I had to tell a story about how I go from like, I've built a big potato gun in my garage to a 10-kilometer long steel pipe in the desert for throwing stuff to space. And hypersonics.
Let's break this down for people who know like nothing about space. I mean, like you said, can use rockets. It's tough. You have to get through the Earth's gravity, so you're spending all this fuel, all this energy.
You're constrained by the energy you can carry.
Right, and this is like this limiting factor. And so fundamentally, I mean, this is one attempt to get rid of that, where you build all this machinery on the ground, you put all this effort into making thing go fast from here.
The idea is that like 99% of the velocity is invested on the ground.
Yeah.
You still have to have a little fart up top so you can circularize your orbit when you're there, but that's like going to be like a solid motor or cold gas, something simple.
So you would still have some kind of propulsion
you have
at
to
the
have
end of
some
the payload.
Okay. Otherwise, the vehicle's going to go around and it's going to come back to where you launched it from. You don't want that.
Okay, where are we? We're in Oakland.
We're in Oakland right now. Beautiful, sunny Oakland, California. I will say that if you're looking for like hardware space in kind of the Bay Area, It's a good place to be. A lot of good hardware companies here.
And we're just, I mean, this is kind of like some
This
old
used to
warehouse,
be Bay
you know.
Bridge Motors.
Okay.
So they used to fix Minis and BMWs here, and the owner Jacques sort of like he owns the whole place. He's kind of semi-retired now, and he's crazy. And he's like, yeah, space gun, awesome.
We're not far from other
No,
shops.
we're in the
buildings.
middle. I tell people that it's like there's a Chuck E. Cheese's, a homeless encampment, a water treatment facility, AAA, and a space gun. That's the cluster we're in immediately right there. It's urban Oakland. And I do tell people, though, I think that I probably have the least problematic unregistered firearm in the city. Right?
And how long have you guys been building it here?
Here, 2 years, 2.5 years.
And you've done like hundreds of tests.
A little, maybe like 110 or so at this
So like 110 times you've fired a projectile into this wall that we'll see.
Absolutely.
And it makes a big noise.
It makes a big noise. We've done a lot of work to basically contain the sound because actually our neighbor on that side, it's actually also a property owned by the same landlord. They operate a bunch of scanning electron microscopes. So it's like, they really appreciate us investing in like the foam that we've put in here. And you'll see a whole bunch of insulating material over there. So it went from being this really loud crack to sort of like a thump.
Okay. So the neighbors are tolerating it. Oh.
Yeah. We worked really closely with them, and we even like installed a bunch of lights inside of their building, so we can press a button, so they get like a 5-minute warning and then a 30-second warning and that sort of a thing to make sure that like people weren't getting surprised. And I think that like the noise isn't actually that bad. It's the feeling that neighbors get of like not having any say that I think really upsets people. So you just have to like talk to people and like keep going back and make sure that they're comfortable with it until you're annoying them, and they'll be like, yeah, you're fine, get out of here. then you're good.
Okay, I did some reading before this. I watched some videos to try to get the physics. Physics is not one of my stronger suits.
Me neither.
Okay, so for like someone like me, break down. You're trying to get a projectile to go really fast, have it come out the other end. You want it. What are the challenges? I mean, what has to happen here?
You basically, our approach is you've got this super long tube. You're investing the energy over a really, really long track, and it's got to be evacuated. You can't have atmosphere basically compressing ahead of the thing.
Okay.
Right. So you start off. You're just pushing gas from behind. You're pushing gas.
It was right on cue.
Yeah, that's true. You're pushing gas from behind this vehicle and you're driving it forward. The limitation of that is that the vehicle can only go as fast as the gas goes, and gas has a top speed. That it kind of depends on how heavy the molecule is. So like nitrogen, pretty slow. Hydrogen, very, very fast. So the fastest guns in the world are actually called light gas guns, and they use superheated hydrogen to throw projectiles up to like actually well in excess of orbital velocities.
Okay.
And they've done that since like the 50s. It's been a tool for research, like testing micrometeorites and stuff like that. So instead of doing one super heavy injection of gas, this gun has 4. Bump, 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 slam.
We can see these.
Yeah, these are the injection ports right here. And that basically means that, the wall thickness of this thing, this is actually sewer pipe. And inside of it, there are a couple of rails. The projectile is never actually in contact with the walls. There are dense plastic bushings between the vehicle and these rails that it rides on. The tube, in some ways, is almost more there to keep the atmosphere out than the pressure in.
Okay.
So, anyways, you're pushing from behind. Eventually, you reach kind of a point of diminishing returns where the speed of the gas, even if you're using hydrogen, can't drive you fast enough to get to the point where you're off and running. Orbital velocities. The fastest you can go there is really kind of like maybe 3 kilometers per second, 2.5 kilometers per second. You got to get closer to like 8 if you want to go to orbit.
Okay.
So instead of pushing from behind, we squeeze from the sides. And the way that this works is the vehicle has a very long wedge sticking off of the rear of it. So it's going this way, you have this wedge over here, and gas is blowing in from the sides. And right as this thing is passing, you're squeezing. So if you're pushing from behind, gas goes 1 inch forward and the projectile's pushed 1 inch forward. But here, if the gas moves in on this wedge 1 inch, you then have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches forward to get displaced.
Okay.
So just, it's the same way a sailing vessel can travel faster than the speed of the wind because it moves at an angle to the wind. That angle is built into this geometry.
And this is something we already knew? Like, or was that shape?
I thought we were super clever in coming up with the idea,
Okay.
and then after working on it for like a year, I found a paper by some German dude in the 1960s.
Okay.
Turns out it's an idea that's been around for a long time. The constraint is you have to inject that gas
Super precise.
super precisely.
Like
And-
timing. So you have
Yeah,
this projectile racing down this thing,
yeah.
and you have to give it these boosts. Like,
Right. Yeah. And the thing is that once you're traveling like supersonic, once you're really faster than the gas, the gas can no longer push from behind. So if you miss, if you're too late, it literally adds no additional velocity. You have to hit that wedge. It's a target and it's moving really quickly.
And the tube has to be really long to get you to the speed. Because
Well,
I'm just picturing the
you
longer it is,
could
the
do
more
it.
you're slowing down, right?
No. So not if it's evacuated on the inside.
Okay.
Right. You're gliding at that
Yeah.
point. You won't slow down until you hit gas. What having the longer tube lets you do is every time I double the number of injections, maximum pressure, maximum temperature, and maximum force of acceleration, and that's an important one, cuts in half.
Okay.
So if you stretch the system out, all of a sudden, my gas tanks aren't like fiber wrapped fucking Wolverine claws. They're just steel. They're mild steel, right? And same thing with the tube. The number one ingredient in our system by mass is going to be concrete. It's going to look a lot more like a natural gas pipeline than it will look like an aerospace product. I tell people this sometimes, like we're a civil engineering firm disguised as an aerospace company with an aerospace product. But like by making it longer, you basically lower the threshold. All your margins get easier, everything gets easier, and you're being more gentle both to the gun because the peak energy is low.
Okay.
And you're being more gentle to the vehicle. And if you want to launch satellites to space, you need to be gentle.
And this one is how long? This is
This is like 65 feet?
65 feet, and the final might be like 10
kilometers.
10 kilometers.
10
Okay.
kilometers. But you know, here's the thing. Like, well, one, the rocket sled at Holloman, that thing's like, I think like 22 kilometers long. People build stuff like
Yeah.
this. Two, like 20 kilometer long pipelines literally built every day, right? So to the degree that you
sure.
think of this as, I am going to hire pipe welders and fitters who normally work on pipelines, and they're gonna build this thing for us. It's not a special skill set. It's not a special supply chain. It's just coming from that.
Yeah.
I will never buy anything from an aerospace supplier. I've sworn them off. It's either we make it in-house or we buy it from oil and gas. That's it.
Okay, super, possibly quite a dumb question.
No,
but
flat.
Like obviously this.
How do you go to space?
yeah, and
No, it's great.
even in the rendering I saw on the wall,
Yeah.
I don't see like a big
There's no
curve.
So the thing is, if you do a curve, like show, and I think Ariga has a picture of this on their website, and I think it's a mistake, really, because like if you're going at orbital velocities and then you start doing this, show me how much force you're actually putting on that track.
Yeah.
If you have a multi-ton payload and you suddenly decide to go, whoop,
Yeah.
like you know, yikes, like the sudden G-forces and the jerk from that maneuver is going to be horrific. And the more massive the vehicle is, like you just might not be able to build a structure that can take the shock of that.
Yeah.
We're talking about flat on the ground. Another thing is the good Lord blessed this earth with a shitload of flat land in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to give you Mount Kilimanjaro. Nobody's going to give you that mountain Ecuador everyone talks about for kinetic launch. No, it's also a real estate problem. You have to be somewhere where you could detonate an atomic bomb and nobody would notice, because you're talking about a vehicle that is moving at high hypersonic speeds in the lowest, thickest atmospheres. If you thought the Concorde was loud, wait till you get a load of this. So you've got noise. You don't want to be a nuisance. You've got to be, you don't want it to be comically expensive to build. To put this thing at 45 degrees, you're talking about boring into the ground
So
further
that's
than
what you
anyone's
have to
ever
do
done.
to get the up part is do this at the same.
No. Flat on the ground.
Flat on,
So
we're staying flat. We're
the
still
idea-
staying
you're
flat.
still staying
All right,
flat.
I want to
Well,
go up.
Okay, yeah, there are two things. One, there are actually a set of controls techniques from like the 1960s used in warheads.
Okay.
Where vehicle comes out, hits the atmosphere, and you can basically control where the center of mass is located in the vehicle to cause it to impose control.
Okay.
And cause it to basically ramp up by shifting the center of mass back and down. That's how you do that relative to its center of pressure. And this was developed in the 60s because when you're re-entering the atmosphere with a warhead, trying to deliver doom and destruction onto your enemies, like you do, you want to be able to wiggle around those Russian missile defense systems. So that's why that was developed. It's a relatively simple control technique. And that combined with like changing the shape of the vehicle, you're skipping like a stone off of the atmosphere. So you start here, you come out, you hit the atmosphere, and you lift. So you ramp up over the course of flight through the atmosphere.
Okay.
Also, cool thing, despite what some people say, the Earth is curved. And so it's dropping away from you and you're going
Okay,
up.
that's where I thought we were going. But walk me through it one more time. Okay, so this thing is 10 kilometers long.
10 kilometers long, flat on the ground.
Projectile comes out the end.
Yep.
And then how far is it traveling?
You probably want to make sure everything is clear downrange for something on the order of 60 to 80 kilometers.
60 to 80.
For noise.
Okay. Okay.
And then you're going to be out of the atmosphere in like, that's a CTO question more than a CEO question, but I think it's something like 120 kilometers.
Okay.
Now, the heat flux that a vehicle like this will have to take is going to be absolutely crazy. Like the Apollo capsules were something like 3 or 4% phenolic resin by mass, ablative material by mass, right? The minimum viable product for us, the smallest vehicle we might ever build, is going to be closer to 50%. You're going to sacrifice a huge amount of material. You have a long, sharp nose
at the
on the front of the thing
Okay.
that is going to turn into a snub over the course of like a 2-second or 3-second flight period.
Because it's hitting so much atmosphere.
It's hitting so much atmosphere, the heat is so bad, and the way that it's rejecting heat is it's turning solid stuff into plasma and kicking it off.
Okay.
So the trick with this is, not only is the heat a function of how fast you're going, it's also a function of how big the surface area is. So the trick with this is that volume gets bigger faster than surface area as the vehicle gets larger. You're going to be going at a fixed speed, so that's just a really, really big number in terms of the amount of heat you have to take. But as the vehicle gets larger, its nose doesn't get that much bigger. So its cross-sectional surface area gets bigger much, much more slowly than its volume. And volume is what you use to pack more phenolic resin on. So a 1-ton vehicle might be like 50% phenolic resin, but a 20-ton vehicle would be closer to like 5 or 6% phenolic resin. So you have more and more room for other stuff.
Currently, you guys are building you're starting to build a bigger one in Nevada, and how the diameter on that will...
Well, that'll be like, this is like a 8-inch interior diameter, and the next one's gonna be like a 28?
This is 6 inches.
6-inch, sorry.
5.5 interior. The one in Nevada is 29-inch interior, 30-inch exterior.
What he said.
That was CTO Nathan.
That was CTO right there. I confabulate numbers all the time. You should, whenever you're asking for numbers, definitely talk to the CTO.
We'll ask Nathan later. Okay, on this one, the current
and that
payload-
one will be closer to 1,800 feet long.
Okay.
Big.
Okay.
And
So the final one is 10 kilometers. But
this one will be about half a kilometer.
Okay, so you're building a half a kilometer one next, and the payload size for this is a few pounds.
Yeah, about a pound.
A pound.
I'd say a pound.
And the payload of the one you're making in Nevada,
250.
250, and then the final payload.
I have to say, final payload. Be careful when you say words like that.
Okay, but the first space...
MVP space launch system would be something on between 2,000 and 1,000 pounds total mass coming out the end. With a payload that's on the order of 500 to like 750 kilograms.
So like a medium-sized satellite.
A couple 100-kilogram satellites, or like one Starlink satellite of the latest generation.
Okay,
that kind of payload range.
And clearly, the idea is that rockets are expensive, take a lot of effort and people and process to launch.
Yeah,
you can only
and that's a function of the rocket equation.
The
just
machinery,
like the math is just hard.
Okay,
it's physics.
I'm assuming the goal with this is that hopefully the idea is it's simpler. You launch more often.
Yeah. So here's like the high point here is that like when I say MVP, what I mean is a system that can compete with Starship economically by charging an order of magnitude less.
So you can't put up as much stuff each time, but you can.
It's way cheaper to operate. Way cheaper to operate. I also think that like the company, like my ideal max size for the company is like 150 employees.
Okay.
Right, and that's like again competing directly with SpaceX and launch, and both of those things, the lower cost. Like my pricing plan is to charge a order of magnitude less than whatever SpaceX is charging at that time. Okay. And if they drop their price, I'll drop my price.
Per satellite, per mass,
on a per mass basis.
And okay, and I know there's kind of the first missions to fly stuff to space, and then there's an idealized future further down.
Yes.
But on this first,
Yeah,
so the
MVP
first-
is something that can survive in the market, and I think to survive in the market, you have to target Starship, and you have to be much better.
But okay, in the world where you guys have built that thing and you've been at it for a couple of years, how often would you be sending something?
My
to
hope would
space?
be daily.
Daily. Okay.
Daily, multiple times a day. I think that used to be a joke 10 years ago, and I think that people aren't laughing anymore. Like, I think that the idea of daily launches is completely reasonable now.
I mean, SpaceX, with all the complicated stuff we talked about, is doing it.
Doing it.
Like,
They're doing it.
could do it every day if they wanted.
I actually think it's starting to come down to spaceport capacity. I think that is part of the, and we would basically, I actually suspect, and we're not married to anything at this point, but middle of nowhere Australia is actually where I think is
to do this.
space
That
launch
makes a lot
system.
of sense.
I think
Yeah.
that the United States, we have the land, but we don't actually have the airspace.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're in like the middle of nowhere,
much
Texas or
traffic,
Nevada, you're between two cities.
Yeah.
And like shutting down that much airspace is a huge ask for the FAA. But if you're in the middle of Australia, there's large sections of open land with open airspace
Yeah.
overhead.
So, and you said you have this more futuristic vision. What is that?
So I think that like what I described to you was kind of our version of the Falcon 1, sort of the thing that could minimally compete in the market. In my opinion, the only reason I build that is because I want to raise the money necessary to build the thing my Falcon 9, right? My Falcon 9 is probably on the order of 30 kilometers, 25 kilometers long. The interior of the tube is like, it's like 4 meters, like nice hallway to walk down. And you're pushing, like, you see my CTO is yelling, 5 meters. We fight about this.
It's good fact checking.
Yeah. I do think,
process fact checking.
I do think that he carries around a bottle with water and he's, stop saying numbers. But I do think that that's probably pushing something on the order of a 20-ton payload.
Okay.
And that's what lets us get the price per kilogram down to like aggressively low numbers. So here's the thing. I don't want to be a launch company. I think that launch is a loss leader, and that it's obvious that, like, Starlink, in my opinion, I've thought this for a long time. I want to say I was ahead of the curve on this, but it's proof that, like, the way that you make money in space with a rocket or with space access is not selling it.
No, the rockets are terrible.
The rocket's a terrible
SpaceX's
business.
value is all in Starlink.
It's all in Starlink.
Yeah.
And Starlink is going to completely eat the telecommunications industry and grow it enormously. I wouldn't be shocked if telecommunications goes from like space-based telecommunications goes from like 300 billion to a couple trillion in the next couple of years. The ability to have an incredibly low price for putting stuff into space is effectively strength in deploying completely new types of businesses in space. Right, and here's the thing: like, if I can give space, if space launch gets cheap enough for Longshot, my plan is to give it away for free. Give it away for free, right? But maybe if I give you space launch for free, you buy fuel in space from moi. You buy downlink from
You want to be a space lord.
the Baron. Yes. Rockefeller standing astride the railroads. The goal of all startups should be to attract antitrust attention. That is the goal of all startups.
That's the
You
man
want to
with
get
the
there.
Puddles the Clown shirt. So it all fits. Makes perfect
But
sense.
yeah, I think that like, I do think that we can get to a place like, by the energetics and the math that we're looking at, I think that we can probably get to a place below $10 a kilogram. Like, look, if you're actually serious about like sending human beings to space, it's not this that you need to worry about, right? Like, Hawaii requires 10 tons per person per year. That's what they import to keep Hawaiians at a Hawaiian standard of living. They have potable water that falls out of the sky for no good reason. Fish, they've got pineapples, they've got all kinds of stuff. They've got like a 150 long year history of investment in infrastructure. So if you're actually talking about starting a colony on Mars or the moon or deep space, you're looking at hundreds of tons of stuff per person per year sustained for a long time.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, like, I don't think Starship is going to be getting below like $200, $300 a kilogram. If Starship blows up once out of every 1,000 times it has flown, it'll be the best rocket ever built by human beings. Like, that's not a recipe for super low costs. So I think that rockets are probably what we're stuck with for putting human beings into space because of the low G-forces. But that 100 tons of stuff per 100 kilograms of human being, that's going to be this guy right here. So the cost basis for putting material into space has to bottom out, or it's never going to happen. It's going to be a fantasy. So we've got to do something. And I talk a lot of shit about my fellow kinetic launch companies, Ariga, magnets. How do they work? But I hope that they're right and that I'm wrong. There's a lot of different ways to make things go fast on the surface of the Earth. All rockets, as they get better, tend to look like each other. And that's because the physics are super constrained. There are only so many solutions. I think that like spin launch or Ariga, wave motion, these guys could prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, guys. Show me that you got what it takes, because somebody's going to crack the kinetic launch nut. And when they do, I think that we're going to see growth that is currently difficult to imagine. In my opinion, all cool stuff that's happened in space in the past 15 years is because of Falcon 9.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a 50% drop in the price based on like what the Russians and Indians were charging.
The cadence and
yeah, the cadence, everything else.
just knowing you could kind of count on it. I appreciate everything you said. I'm sure people have told you you're crazy many times. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, isn't this fucking nuts?
It is. But yeah, here's the thing. You know what I think's fucking more nuts, right? Thinking that you're going to compete with SpaceX by doing what SpaceX did 15 fucking years ago.
Yeah.
So every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there with a rocket company can just suck it. All right. They want to call me nuts. Like you came out of the womb dead, right? Like there's no way you're going to compete with SpaceX building a rocket 8 years after SpaceX hit the market. You're crazy. That's crazy. I think that like spin launch, they have technical challenges that I don't think they're going to be able to overcome. But if they prove me wrong, okay, they have a potential to compete because they have a completely different cost basis. Sure. Like financing people can get scared off by technical risk, and they can be kind of talked around on financial risk. And so I think that like the kinds of companies that you see get money and get big, in my opinion, are overly technically conservative with like a semi-reasonable story to tell on the financing side. For some reason, there's a selection effect, I think, for that. As much as Silicon Valley says like, oh, we want to fund technical risk, I don't think you really do. I think you want like, this is cool, but like, could this be like a SaaS space gun somehow? Yeah. Like, can we like make this a dating app? Like, I think there's a pressure in that direction.
In the near term, you guys are trying to make money
on hypersonics. Totally.
So
Got it.
The U.S. government is deeply afraid that China is ahead of us with hypersonic technology. So they've been funding all kinds of hypersonic everything.
Yeah, Stratolaunch
and Varda. And Rocket Lab. And so the interest here is just that you guys could throw projectiles at this high speed and we would gather data on...
Yeah, if you want to do hypersonic skeet shooting, I'm your man.
Yeah.
You don't want to drop like I don't know what Rocket Lab is it's probably somewhere between 20 and 30 million bucks for a ride. Something like that. If you're trying to just practice shooting stuffing down or even tracking things, you don't want to drop that kind of money. So we're planning on offering our kind of like hypersonic launch option at the beginning, which is going to be between low speeds for us, like Mach 5 to Mach 7-ish. Slow. That'll be something like 150 grand. And good luck getting that from a rocket for like 100 kilogram payload, So I think that's a compelling offer, and DoD seems interested.
But that's like the stepping stone to help pay for where you guys want to go.
I call it killing your baby.
Okay.
That's what I call it. It's chopping up your baby.
Are you supposed to do that?
So here's the thing. I think that good founders, the founders that I respect and that I emulate, clearly have a vision of the thing they want to build. This beautiful, wonderful thing that the world needs really badly and that gives me incredible joy to work on. That's my baby, right? And the brutality of the first 6 months of Longshot was the realization that I have to take a meat cleaver and take that baby's leg, hack it off, go to somebody and say, look at this leg. This is a great leg. This leg's going to make you a bunch of money. That is the absolutely heartbreaking process that is necessary to get something really, really big built.
Where you want to go.
Where you want to go. You have to stitch your baby back together from the individual pieces that you have had to mutilate this thing to get it built. It's really, really hard as a person who has like a vision for what the thing is to realize there is no appetite in the market for this vision. There's not sufficient appetite to fund it all the way.
Yeah.
I must be able to digest it into smaller pieces so that I can get it built.
It's normal.
Yeah, it is. And I will say that was the hard lesson of the first 6 months of trying to raise money for Longshot and why we do hypersonics. And I've told the hypersonics people at DoD, I do not care about you as a customer. We're going to build something amazing, and I am happy to have you along for the ride. And they like that.
Yeah.
Because they want to buy stuff that people are commercializing in other directions. They don't want to be your primary customer. That's a bad place for them to be, actually.
And in part of the baby metaphor, you said something the world needs. Does the world need a space gun?
There's a general parochialism in human beings. It's really difficult for us to see how incredibly constrained we are because we've always had this constraint. We've never had access to space. We don't know what that future really looks like. Very few people have the imagination. You know, the phone in your pocket is made of cadmium and lanthanum and all kinds of metals that are currently pulled out of mountains in Congo. We've basically outsourced all that stuff to the developing world. All the brain damage and everything that comes with it is like Mongolia, other places. There is a future where basically all heavy industry goes off of Earth, and it's better. It's not just for the benefit of the environment. It happens to produce an incredible benefit for the environment. It is also to the benefit of every human being. There's a future of completely unconstrained material wealth because the solar system has enough stuff to support a human civilization of trillions. Trillions of human beings at like an American standard of living, the energy, the raw materials, it's there. And so the question, I think, is sort of laden with this assumption that like, this is where we are and this is all we know. I think that the best thing that you can do to address that question is probably, I'm going to steal a Bob from you, from him right now.
Mr. Mars.
Mr. Mars himself. Dude, I will say, Bob, if you're watching this, getting rid of the comb over was a good idea, man. It was rough for many years. It was rough. Why can't I stop making fun of people's hair? What's wrong with me? It speaks to an inner insecurity. Got some gray coming in. What happened in 1492?
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Now, in 1492, if you were a European, you would have had no fucking idea that some dickhole weaver's son flew off somewhere to bring like syphilis back to Europe, right? It was completely irrelevant. Like the richest man in the world, Lorenzo de' Medici, died. A major war between France and England ended. There was like a lot of stuff that would have been front page news. The reason you know that and are able to rattle it off right now is not because Columbus was a cool guy. It wasn't because what he did was miraculous in some sense. It is because that particular thing clearly presaged and was necessary to happen to fundamentally facilitate the civilization that you now occupy, right? It was important. The drop in price of access to space, forget Longshot, think about it in a bigger sense. The drop in price of access to space is important in the same sense. The civilization that exists 200 years from now, for our descendants, is going to be resource constrained, trapped on Earth, and at each other's throats on a dying planet, or it is going to be a future of infinite abundance. One of those two things. One of those is a future in which we got to space early enough that resource constraints stopped mattering and we were able to preserve the Earth as kind of a garden for humanity. And the other is a really, really dark future. I think it's important.
You made a good case.
Thanks to Bob. Thanks to Bob for the Columbus bit. I didn't make that up.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're incredibly welcome. Thank you so much for coming by. I strive to entertain and educate.
You did both. You did both. Thanks, man. That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.